Let's begin with the foundations. Let's discuss The Long Walk, the 2025 film. This is another lecture. I am Alexei, and today we will examine a work that is essentially a lean parable about power, spectacle, and consent under pressure. We shall be careful with our terms and generous with our curiosity.
Hi, I'm Priyanka. I'm excited to walk through this one with you. Sorry, poor choice of verb. I'll ask the questions that keep showing up in discussion sections, and maybe some that don't.
To frame our discussion, The Long Walk is an American dystopian survival thriller, directed by Francis Lawrence, written by J.T. Molnar, and released by Lionsgate in September 2025. It adapts Stephen King's 1979 novel, originally published under the Bachman pseudonym, with notable fidelity to its austere rules and moral ambiguity. In simpler terms, imagine a national marathon where stopping means death. The state sells it as patriotism, and the audience buys tickets. The result is both a spectacle and a study in how humans bind themselves to terrible bargains when the alternative is poverty, shame, or invisibility. It's important to understand two terms. First, totalitarian regime, a system that seeks to control, as it were, nearly all aspects of life through centralized authority, coercion, and surveillance. In the film's alternate 1970s United States, scarred by civil war and depression, this regime converts violence into televised ritual, thereby legitimizing itself through mass participation. Second, chronological shooting. The production actually filmed events in narrative order, a rarity. We observe that this choice lets the actors' bodies and relationships deteriorate gradually without continuity tricks, reinforcing the narrative's attrition as method and meaning.
So basically, the plot is a straight line with a stopwatch. 50 boys walk at 3 miles per hour. 3 warnings means execution. Last one standing gets money and a wish. Is it fair to say the simplicity is the point? Like a lab experiment we can all watch on TV?
Arguably, yes. The rule's simplicity is a moral centrifuge. It spins away excuses. As we continue, recall that voluntariness here is coerced by circumstance. Boys enroll because despair narrows the path of choice until it resembles fate.
On relevance. We keep seeing public pain turned into entertainment. I'm curious about how the film suggests spectacle can become governance. Is that too strong a claim?
Not too strong, just precise. In this context, the walk functions as propaganda and pacification. It reframes deprivation as virtue and death as ceremony. The movie wisely withholds a detailed macroeconomic mechanism for recovery. Instead, it shows how ritualized suffering can normalize obedience, even if the stated civic benefit is dubious. The adaptation challenge, by contrast, is to hold that ambiguity without collapsing into mere vagueness, a difficulty that Stephen King's parable imposes by design. Now, basic history. The source novel appears in 1979. Attempts to adapt it spanned decades. George A. Romero considered it in 1988. Frank Darabont acquired rights in 2007, with talk of a low-budget existential approach. New Line took a run in 2018 with James Vanderbilt. Andre Overdahl was attached in 2019. Then, in November 2023, Lionsgate and Media Capital Technologies brought in Francis Lawrence, with a screenplay by J.T. Molnar. Casting unfolded in mid-2024. Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson among the first. In July, Garrett Waring, Tut Nuot, Charlie Plummer, Ben Wang, Joshua Ojic, Roman Griffin Davis, Mark Hamill, and Judy Greer joined, with Hamill as the major. Production began July 2024. It wrapped September 2024. Crucially, filmed in story order. Jeremiah Freites completed the score in March 2025. An original country ballad, Took a Walk, performed by Shabuzi and Stephen Wilson Jr., anchors the elegiac tone. On release, September 2025, domestic. Opening weekend projections were $6 to $10 million out of 2,845 theaters. The film earned $4.8 million on Friday, including $1.3 million in previews. It debuted with $11.7 million, finishing fourth. Word of mouth produced above-average holds through November and December. Worldwide grosses ultimately reached about $63 million, roughly $35 million domestic and $28 million international, versus a $20 million budget. Critics praised performances and stark cinematography. Others found the world-building thin and the ending vexing. CinemaScore audiences gave it a B. Sitges closed with it in October 2025. Awards attention followed. Critics groups in Austin, Seattle, London, and Florida. ASTRA nominations for crafts and adaptation. A Saturn nod for Best Thriller Movie. A Robert Altman Ensemble nomination at the Film Independent Spirit Awards. In conclusion here, we see a modestly scaled production that achieved durable engagement despite a deliberately austere design.
And the movie even offers two endings, right? In one, the winner uses his wish to obtain a carbine and kills the major. In the alternate, he spares him and later sends money to families like Hank Olson's widow and Ray Garrity's mother. That choice to split outcomes seems, engineered to keep the debate alive.
Yes, the pair of codas reframes the moral. Public rupture versus private restitution. Both leave the system's larger integrity conspicuously unresolved, which is, I would argue, thematically accurate to King's bleak fable. Before we enter questions, a personal note. I am drawn to dystopias not for their forecasts, but for their diagnostics. They tell us what hurts now. Chess teaches us that positions degrade by inches, not only by spectacular blunders. The Long Walk illustrates the same principle in human terms. Well, let us proceed.
So, the first big question is historical. How did we get from the 1979 novel to this 2025 film? And what mattered most in preserving the story's essence?
Let's start with the history. The novel is minimalist. Road, boys, rules. Nothing extraneous. Adaptation attempts stalled for decades precisely because the piece resists conventional beats. No relief valve, no backstory montages to distribute empathy safely, and no tidy revolution. Darabont's 2007 posture, weird, existential, very contained, foreshadowed the final film's strategy. Keep the rules, compress exposition, let performance carry the philosophy. Francis Lawrence, known for large-scale dystopias, pivots here to an actor-forward construction. Shot chronologically, the boys' fatigue and camaraderie accumulate materially. We observe this in the evolving group dynamics around Ray Garrity and Pete McVries, in breakdowns like Barkovich's self-destruction with a spoon, and in episodes of solidarity, such as the pact to send money to Hank Olson's widow after he is shot attacking soldiers. The film maintains King's cruel arithmetic. 3 warnings, execution on the spot, crowds as chorus and jury. It also preserves the ambiguous finale, while daring to present an alternate ending that relocates meaning from spectacle to penance. That balance, fidelity with a controlled deviation, arguably constitutes the adaptation's core success.
And specifically about the director's hand. How does Francis Lawrence shape the look and rhythm, beyond just filming in order?
We can infer a few signatures. The cinematography leans into stark, desaturated expanses. rain-sheened roads, crowds that feel at once festive and funereal, yielding what reviewers called a morose beauty. This is not kinetic action, but procedural attrition, paced by Jeremiah Freitz's spare score and the closing country ballad Took a Walk. Casting amplifies the method. Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson ground the moral axis between vengeance and self-limitation. Mark Hamill's Major, crisp uniform, unfailing smile, acts as concierge to annihilation. The director's restraint is decisive. He rarely cuts away to explain the regime, trusting uniforms, broadcasts, and the crowd's appetite to do the world building. In conclusion, the rhythm is disciplined, monotony weaponized into suspense.
Okay, second big question. A counterfactual. What changes if the walk allows any gender rather than only boys? Would the propaganda effect strengthen, or would it backfire?
To elaborate, in the film's alternate 1970s, the boys represent the cross-section of states and symbolically the Republic's future conscripts. Limiting the field to boys tacitly aligns the spectacle with militarized masculinity, endurance, obedience, sacrificial usefulness. If any gender could compete, two shifts follow. First, propaganda optics. The regime could claim meritocratic inclusivity, laundering cruelty through equality language. Paradoxically, the shock of witnessing girls or mixed-gender adolescents executed on camera might intensify both ratings and moral recoil, producing a volatile legitimacy dividend that could quickly invert into public disgust. Second, domestic ideology. Patriarchal narratives that treat boys as cannon fodder and girls as reproducers would be scrambled. The state could either modernize its myth, asserting that all bodies belong to the nation equally, or expose its own limits when certain deaths prove intolerable to audiences habituated to gendered scripts about protection.
And on power dynamics. If the regime crossed that line, would it gain control or reveal fragility?
Speaking of fragility, authoritarian systems thrive on predictability of response. Including all genders might initially expand the spectacle's reach, but it also multiplies avenues for moral refusal. Grief organizations, religious figures, even internal factions could peel away. The state's confidence in its own myth would be stress-tested. Either the spectacle would normalize a new, harsher baseline, or the public would find at last a point of non-consumption. Theoretically, then, the change is a high-variance gamble. Greater domination if the audience accepts it, faster delegitimization if they do not.
Third big question. The endings. How should we read the assassination ending versus the alternate, quieter coda? Is one more faithful or just differently angry?
This logically leads us to interpretation under uncertainty. In one ending, after 331 miles in a rain-soaked city, Pete McVries obtains a soldier's carbine and kills the major, then walks away. Some critics argue this scene is implausible. Why no immediate reprisal from soldiers? Why the crowd's silence? While others treat it as subjective, possibly a dying image that punctures the pageantry only in the imagination. In the alternate, Pete spares the major, continues walking, and a postscript implies monthly cash envelopes to Hank Olson's widow, Ray Garrity's mother, and Art Baker's grandmother, with Art's rosary enclosed. The first ending externalizes fury, the second internalizes guilt. Both keep the system standing. Both refuse the catharsis of institutional collapse, which is, I would argue, consonant with the novel's refusal to reward us with policy outcomes. The question is not which is true, but what each does to our sense of responsibility. Vindication through a shot fired on camera, or restitution through money that can never balance the ledger.
And audiences. How did people actually react to that ambiguity? Were they okay with not knowing which reality to trust?
We observe mixed responses. Critics widely praised performances and the look. Others registered impatience with the thinly sketched premise and the withheld closure. Opening night cinema score was a B, suggesting general satisfaction. Yet discourse around the finale remained polarized, even as word of mouth produced steady box office holds. For further study, I would recommend qualitative audience research on which ending viewers saw or preferred, and whether interpretations shifted after post-screening discussion. It's crucial to understand that ambiguity here is not a bug. It is the carrier of the film's ethical payload.
Maybe that's why particular scenes stand out. Like Collie Parker stealing a rifle and then dying by suicide after being wounded. Or Barkovich choosing death with a spoon. It's not just rules. It's how the rules shape choices we don't want to admit we could make.
Yes. And in Ray's near-fatal run toward his mother in Freeport, saved by Pete, in Art Baker's quiet stop after internal hemorrhage, in Billy Stebbins' revelation of blood ties to the Major, which turns the walk into a grotesque audition for paternal recognition. These micro-histories, sparse as they are, supply the film's moral oxygen. To summarize, The Long Walk as a film distills a totalitarian ritual into a televised endurance test, where 3 warnings equal death and victory grants a wish that cannot redeem the premise. We explored 3 questions: how the adaptation preserved King's essence across decades of development, how opening the contest to any gender would alter propaganda and power, and how 2 endings, assassination or atonement, steer our ethical reading without resolving the system itself. For those interested in a broader context, we suggest continued study of Stephen King's work as cultural diagnostics, how spare premises can expose elaborate social machinery. Thank you for listening. Reflect on where your attention goes, because attention spends us as surely as money. This, then, completes our present analysis.
That was helpful to think through, actually. Thank you, Professor.